I built my life on loyalty, raised a daughter on love, held my family together through loss, storms, and empty bank accounts. So when my granddaughter squeezed my arm at the birthday dinner and whispered, "Grandma, we need to go. Now," I thought she was just being dramatic. I almost stayed. I almost smiled it off. But something in her eyes, a terror I hadn't seen since my husband died, made me stand. I left my purse, my coat, my dignity. I walked out that door with cake, still on the table. 2 days later, I learned what was really waiting for me upstairs. A man, a contract, a pen, and a plan to erase me from everything I ever built. I thought family protected you, but it turns out sometimes they just practice their betrayal in silence until the day they need your signature. They say time softens everything, but at 69, I can tell you, that's a lie people tell themselves to survive. Time doesn't soften grief. It doesn't dull betrayal. It just teaches you how to carry it more quietly. I've carried a lot in my life, not just as a nurse for 35 years, but as a mother, a widow, a woman who gave more than she had and smiled while doing it. After Harold passed, I told myself I'd make it through. I had to. Elena was only 13 and the world was too sharp for a girl that age without a father. So I worked. I took extra shifts, back-to-back nights, holidays, and every weekend that no one else wanted. I wore compression socks like armor and kept instant coffee in every bag I owned. Some days I came home so tired I didn't recognize my own hands, but Elena always had dinner, always had her school books, always had a mother who showed up. When Elena told me she wanted to study abroad, France of all places, I nodded, smiled, and said we'd find a way. I applied for loans, dipped into Harold's life insurance, and sold my engagement ring to cover the deposit. People told me I was crazy, that a girl like Elena didn't need to go across the world to find herself. But I believed in her. She was brilliant, charismatic, so sure of who she wanted to be. I thought maybe if she saw the world, she'd come back stronger, kinder, grateful. She did come back, but she didn't bring gratitude with her. Still, I didn't see it then. I was too busy trying to make her life easy. When she and her husband Daniel bought their first home, I offered to co-sign the mortgage. When their daughter Lily was born, I moved closer, renting a small bungalow just 15 minutes away. I babysat 3 times a week, taught Lily how to read using the same dog-eared books Elena once chewed on as a toddler. Lily loved those stories. She used to fall asleep with her cheek pressed against Goodnight Moon, like the moon itself would keep her safe. Lily is 15 now, and sometimes I still see that little girl in her, especially when she laughs with her whole chest or tucks her hair behind her ear the way Elena used to when she was nervous. We've always been close. She calls me Gran, not Grandma, says it makes me sound cooler. We bake together, watch old movies, share secrets neither of us tells Elena. I live alone now. The house is quiet except for the ticking clock in the kitchen and the morning sound of the kettle. My back aches more than it used to, and some mornings I forget why I walked into a room. But I still believe in something foolish and unfashionable, that family matters, that the sacrifices we make come back to us eventually, that love doesn't go unnoticed forever. I keep a photo on the mantle. It's old. Lily was maybe 6, Elena in her late 20s, all of us bundled in coats at a winter fair. Elena's smile is wide, her arm wrapped around me, unforced. Sometimes I stare at that photo for too long, wondering if that version of her ever really existed, or if I just needed it to. Because here's what no one tells you about being a parent. You don't stop hoping. Even when the signs are there, even when your child grows distant, critical, calculating, you still wait for the moment they come back to you. You wait for the thank you that never comes. You wait for the apology, the realization, the hug that erases the space time has carved. Elena hasn't hugged me in years. Still, I showed up, Every holiday, every birthday. I made her favorite carrot cake, the one with crushed pineapple and cream cheese frosting. I bought gifts with more thought than my own groceries. I stayed late to help clean up even when no one asked me to. Because that's what mothers do. We show up, even when it hurts. And I convinced myself it wasn't pity in Elena's eyes when she handed me the smallest chair at the table. That it wasn't calculation in her voice when she suggested I write Lily into my will early, just in case. That it wasn't detachment when she called me Margaret in front of her friends instead of Mom. Love makes excuses. Loyalty makes more. But even now, even after everything, I still believe in Lily. That girl has something in her, something good, something unswayed. When she texts me late at night just to say, "Love you, Gran," it feels real. When she hugs me without looking around first, it feels honest. She's my anchor, my only reminder that not everything I built has turned against me. That belief is what keeps me going, that maybe, just maybe, not all of the seeds I planted fell on concrete. I didn't know then what was coming. The storm that had already started to swirl around me. But I felt something shift, a cold breeze in a warm room, a delay in Elena's voice when she invited me over for her birthday, a strange glint in Daniel's eyes, and Lily, who always seemed so open, looked away just a second too long. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself family doesn't plot, but time, no matter how quietly it walks, always leaves a mark. The gift sat on the kitchen table wrapped in paper with tiny golden leaves, a design I picked because Elena used to collect leaves as a girl, pressing them between pages of our old phone book. I tied the ribbon twice, checked the corners 3 times. Still, it looked small somehow, incomplete. I wrote the card slowly. "Happy birthday, Elena. I'm proud of you." Then I stared at it for 10 minutes, wondering if that was true, wondering if it mattered. I stood in the hallway, keys in hand, and hesitated. I opened the text Elena had sent me the day before. "Can't wait to see you, Mom. You've always been my rock. Tonight is about family. Love you endlessly." At first, it warmed me. I hadn't heard her call me Mom in a long time. But as I reread it, a strange chill crept in. The phrasing, it felt too polished, like it belonged on a Hallmark card, not from a daughter to her mother. And then I noticed something. The message had been forwarded. Not copied, not typed. Forwarded. I scrolled up to double check, and there it was. An earlier version she had sent. Same message, but to someone named Angela. Angela wasn't me. Angela, I suddenly remembered, was Daniel's mother. They'd gone on a cruise together last spring. Elena had sent her a Mother's Day tribute on Facebook. The caption was almost word for word the same. She had forwarded me a message meant for someone else. I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted the message and stared at my reflection in the front door glass. My lipstick looked too bright. My blouse too formal. I was dressing up for a part I no longer played. Then came the moment that stung harder than I expected. I opened the address app on my phone and typed, "Elena's house." The app blinked for a moment before pulling up 5 past addresses. I didn't know which one was current. She'd moved again last month, said something vague about more space for Daniel's office, but she hadn't sent me the new location. I had to scroll back through messages to find a mention of the new street name, Birchwood Lane. I copied the number and pasted it into the GPS. It didn't feel like going to see my daughter. It felt like navigating to a stranger's house. As I drove, memories tugged at me. Elena helping me ice cupcakes at age 10, brushing flour off her nose with the back of her hand. She used to call me her forever teammate. Somewhere along the line, that team disbanded. No formal announcement, just silence in place of affection. The neighborhood was newer than I expected. Wide driveways, manicured lawns, the kind of homes that suggested debt disguised as success. I parked by the curb, 3 houses down. There were already too many cars in front of Elena's. I stepped out of the car and smoothed my skirt. The wind pulled at my scarf as if trying to lead me elsewhere. At the door, I paused. Inside, I heard laughter, loud, overlapping, the kind people use when they're trying to be heard over their doubts. I rang the bell. Vanessa answered, perfectly styled, perfectly detached. "Margaret," she said with a practiced smile, "come in, Elena's just finishing up." She didn't offer to take my coat. She didn't look me in the eye. Inside, the air smelled like candles, too many of them, layered scents that clashed. I held the gift in both hands, unsure where to set it. A caterer in black passed me with a tray of glasses. I hadn't known it was catered. "Gran." Lily appeared from the hallway, her face bright, then dimmed slightly, as if she remembered something too late. She hugged me, and for a moment, everything stilled. "Happy birthday to your mom," I whispered. "She's excited you're here," Lily said carefully, not meeting my eyes. That's when I noticed the cake on the sideboard. It had a long inscription written in glossy red icing, "To the woman who made us all possible." It didn't mention my name. I placed the gift beside a stack of presents. One of the tags read, "From the Andersons." I didn't know who the Andersons were. In the dining room, the chandelier sparkled unnaturally. The table was set like a magazine shoot, chargers under each plate, linen napkins rolled in gold rings. I caught a glimpse of Elena in the kitchen, laughing at something Daniel said. She didn't glance toward me. I started to step forward, but Lily caught my hand. "Gran," she whispered, her voice unusually soft. Her eyes flicked toward the staircase, then back at me. "Can we talk later? Just us?" Something in her tone made my heart skip. "Of course," I said, but she was already moving away, smile plastered on like a costume. And just like that, the warmth I felt when I left the house, what little remained of it, slipped quietly out the door behind me. The dining room buzzed with a strange kind of energy. Not celebration, not warmth. It was too curated, too staged. Margaret stood near the entrance, hands clasped around her purse, eyes scanning the crowd. There were at least 15 people she didn't recognize. Suits, heels, polite laughter, the kind you hear at networking events, not birthday dinners. Conversations drifted in polished tones. Real estate, investment rounds, luxury expansion. A man chuckled about a missed merger like it was a dinner anecdote. No one mentioned memories. No one said happy birthday with affection. Elena floated through the room like a hostess at a corporate gala, not like someone surrounded by family. Her hug to Margaret had been brief, perfunctory. "Glad you could come," she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then she moved on to introduce a couple from Seattle. Daniel, Vanessa, she corrected herself. Margaret still wasn't used to calling her son-in-law by his full name, was working the room like a hotel manager. Every word rehearsed, every gesture too smooth. When he finally turned toward her, his expression shifted into something that resembled delight. "Margaret, you made it," he said, voice ringing a little too loud. "You remember Roger, right? He's with that finance group out of Austin. Big fan of yours." "Of mine?" she asked, confused. Daniel laughed like she'd made a joke. "Oh, come on. Anyone who raised a woman like Elena deserves a standing ovation." Roger nodded, drink in hand. "We've heard all about your days at the clinic. Frontline work. Impressive." Margaret forced a polite smile, unsure why her decades of work as a nurse were being paraded now. Daniel clapped her lightly on the shoulder and turned away before she could ask. The smell of seared steak and lemon risotto filled the air, but Margaret's appetite had vanished. Something about the house felt foreign, not just redecorated, re-engineered, like they were trying too hard to impress the kind of people who didn't value sincerity. She took a seat at the corner of the dining table. Elena joined her a few minutes later, wine glass in hand. "So, Mom," Elena began, her tone light but detached. "How's the garden? Still battling those deer?" "Yes," Margaret said, surprised. "They figured out the motion sensor. Brave little things." Elena nodded, eyes flicking over Margaret's shoulder. "You should really try one of those smart sprinklers. There's a setting that mimics barking dogs. Daniel read about it in Forbes." There was a pause. Margaret tried to make it comfortable. And how's work? Still managing the wellness startup? Elena's smile twitched. Pivoted to consulting, more scalable. Margaret nodded slowly. Sounds flexible. Across the table, a young man with gelled hair asked Vanessa a question. She laughed, too loudly, then gestured at Margaret. "Oh, you'll love this," she said. "My mother-in-law used to stitch up patients in the ER before the doctors even arrived." Margaret blinked. "I wasn't in emergency. I worked geriatric care." Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "Still, tough as nails. She once lifted a man twice her weight after a hip fracture." "That's not accurate," Margaret replied softly. But no one was listening. The next toast came fast, then the next course. Margaret didn't touch her plate. She kept watching Elena, watching how she smiled too often, laughed too loudly, made sure everyone's glasses stayed full but never really looked at anyone. It felt like performance. Then Lily appeared. She walked up beside Margaret's chair and slipped a hand onto her shoulder. Her voice was barely audible. "Grandma." Margaret turned to her. "Can we?" Lily swallowed. "Can you come with me for a second?" Margaret blinked. "Now?" "Please," Lily whispered. "Just trust me. Go now." For one brief second, Margaret froze. Everything around her blurred. The hum of too loud conversation, the glint of new crystal, Daniel's booming laugh from across the room. Then she stood. She didn't announce anything. She didn't excuse herself. She simply followed Lily through the side hallway, past the powder room, and out the back door. The night air wrapped around her like a lifeline. Crisp, honest, real. "Lily," she began, heart pounding. "What is this?" "I don't have time to explain," Lily said quickly, leading her toward the side gate. "But I heard something. Upstairs. A man. He had papers. Mom said, she said you'd be ready to sign." Margaret stopped walking. "What kind of papers?" Lily shook her head. "I don't know, but I know they didn't want you to see them, not until you were already upstairs, and they didn't want me in the room at all." Margaret's chest tightened. "Why would—" But Lily was already pulling again. "Please, just go. Get in your car. I'll text you later." They reached the street. Margaret turned once, just enough to see the glow of the chandelier through the dining room window. She hadn't even had a slice of cake. Her car door opened with a reluctant click. As she sank into the seat, she realized her hands were shaking. She placed them on the wheel, closed her eyes, and took a breath. Everything felt wrong. The dinner, the guests, the message from Elena. Her phone buzzed. "So glad you came tonight. Sorry we didn't get to talk more. Hope you enjoyed everything. Love you. Elena." Margaret stared at it. It was another forward. Same message, different name header. This one was addressed to Angela. The click of the door behind her felt too loud in the quiet car. Margaret sat motionless in the driver's seat, the engine off, her fingers tight around the steering wheel. The porch light of Elena's house still glowed, illuminating the front walkway like a stage. The party buzzed on behind windows thick with noise and light. But out here, it was all stillness. Her mind was a whirl of pieces that didn't yet fit. She reached for her purse. It wasn't there. She leaned to the passenger seat. Empty. The back seat? Nothing. Margaret blinked, her stomach twisting. "I left it on the chair," she whispered, "by the dining table." The gift bag had been light. Her purse had weighed more. And inside that purse, her blood ran cold. The deed. The original property deed. She had brought it with her earlier that day from the safety deposit box, meaning to file it with some of her estate documents when she returned. She'd tucked it into her wallet absent-mindedly, thinking she'd place it in her study drawer later. And now it was gone. Gone. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, opened her messages. No new texts. She started to type to Lily, then hesitated. What would she say? "I left something important. Can you check for it?" Could she even trust that message anymore? Something didn't feel right. Her phone vibrated before she could decide. New message from Lily. "Thank you for leaving when I asked. I'm sorry I didn't explain sooner, but..." They still got what they needed. The words blurred for a moment. They still got what they needed. What did that mean? Margaret's fingers hovered over the screen. She didn't reply. Instead, she opened the Maps app and typed the nearest gas station. She needed light, people, a place to breathe. As she pulled away from the curb, a flash of motion caught her eye. Someone stepping out of Elena's front door, but it wasn't Daniel or Elena. It was a man. Gray coat, thin, carrying a briefcase. He didn't look back. Margaret's breath caught. He'd been seated 2 chairs down from her at the party. She remembered now. He hadn't spoken much, just nodded along and sipped wine, eyes constantly scanning the room. And now he was leaving, alone. She took the next right and pulled into a 24-hour gas station, parking under the harsh white lights. Her heart beat loud in her ears. She reached for her phone again and searched for Lily's name. Her thumbs moved fast. "Lily, what did you mean they got what they needed?" "Read." No reply. She opened the contacts and hovered over Elena's name, but something in her gut told her not to call. Not yet. Instead, she opened the Notes app and began typing everything she remembered. The man in the gray coat, the awkward silence when she stood to leave, the missing purse, Vanessa's exaggerated warmth, Daniel's praise in front of strangers, and that forward. The message originally meant for someone else. She stared at the screen, reading it back. It felt like a scene from a story she didn't write, but was forced to star in. Another vibration. "Lily, I don't think I was supposed to warn you. I only heard them because I was upstairs before they noticed." Her throat tightened. "Margaret, what were they saying?" The response came instantly, that the papers had to be signed tonight, that it would look natural once you had the wine. Margaret pressed a hand to her chest. They had planned for her to drink, to be relaxed, off guard, to lead her upstairs where a man with a briefcase waited, probably with a notary, with documents. But what kind of documents? The deed. That's what they needed. She gripped the steering wheel again. There had to be some way to stop this, some way to act before it was too late. Then her screen lit up again. "Lily, Grandma, did you leave your purse under the chair?" Margaret's heart skipped. "Margaret, yes. Why?" "Lily, I heard Daniel tell someone, we don't need her to sign, we just needed the paperwork." Everything went still. They didn't need her. They needed the documents. The purse was the goal all along. That's why everything felt like a performance. The guest list full of strangers, the family dinner that didn't include family, the forward message, the catered food, the endless refills, they had distracted her. Then Lily's message hit again with a final twist. "I don't know if they used me too. All I know is, I heard Mom ask if I'd talk to you. She smiled when I said I had. Then she left her phone unlocked on the counter with a message open. The same one she sent you, but to someone named Angela." Margaret sat frozen. Her granddaughter may have warned her, but maybe, unknowingly, she had also been part of the trap, and now the trap was closed. The morning after the party, Margaret sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the wall as sunlight crept through the curtains. The room felt colder than usual, despite the late spring air. Her slippers sat untouched on the rug, her cardigan still draped over the armchair by the window. She hadn't moved much since returning from the gas station. No calls had come, no texts from Elena, not even a message to ask where she had gone or whether she made it home safe. And Lily? Silent since that last chilling message. Margaret had checked her front door 3 times last night, confirming the lock with the firm twist her late husband once insisted on. Her purse never showed up. She'd canceled her cards and made a report with her bank. She told them it had been misplaced during a family event. The woman on the phone said, "That happens more than you'd think." And Margaret wondered whether it really did. or if that was just something people said to make things easier. She made coffee, but didn't drink it. The familiar bitterness no longer soothed her. She set it on the kitchen counter, untouched, and stood in the quiet hum of her home. For decades, silence had been a friend. After long shifts in the hospital, after raising Elena alone, after burying her husband, it had been something to look forward to. But now it sounded different, heavier. This silence didn't wrap around her. It pressed down. Margaret walked to the window and looked out across her small yard. The rhododendrons had started to bloom, their petals bright against the fading green of the lawn. The bird bath was empty. She usually filled it after breakfast. She usually fed the birds. She didn't move. Instead, she sat in the worn recliner by the window, the one her husband had spent countless Sundays in, and stared through the glass. By afternoon, she had checked her phone 10 times. Still nothing. No apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement that she had been there or left. The purse was gone. The deed was gone. And maybe, she thought bitterly, so was she. That night, she microwaved a bowl of soup but let it cool untouched. Her appetite, like everything else, had shrunk. As the clock struck 7:30, she instinctively reached for the TV remote. She always watched her favorite show at that hour, but stopped halfway. The routine felt hollow now, like muscle memory disconnected from purpose. What was the point of habit when the meaning had been stripped away? Margaret stood and walked slowly to the old bookshelf in the hallway. She scanned the spines until she found a small, leather-bound journal. It was a gift from Lily on her last birthday. "For when your thoughts are too big for the room," the tag had said. She opened it. The first few pages were blank, save for a scribbled note in Lily's handwriting. "Don't forget who you are. Love, L." Margaret sat back down, pen in hand, and began to write. April 17th, the day after the party. I don't know if I should call it that. A party implies joy. This was more like a negotiation without clarity, where I was the only one unaware of the terms. I left quietly, but the silence that followed feels louder than anything I've heard in my life. No one has called. No one has checked. I suppose I should feel free now, unchained from obligation. Instead, I feel erased. She paused, stared at the ink. Her handwriting looked smaller somehow, like it belonged to someone uncertain. She continued, "I used to believe that family was like a bank. You deposit love, time, sacrifice, and eventually you withdraw care in return. But I think I confused family with loyalty, and loyalty with reciprocity. No one has called. That's the part I can't let go of. Not even Elena. Not even a thank you for coming." Margaret closed the journal, hands trembling. The walls around her home, once filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, bedtime stories, felt like a vault now. She had spent her entire life pouring into others. Elena's school, her tuition, the first apartment, even helping with the down payment on the house she had now been pushed out of. She had stood on hospital floors for 12-hour shifts, cleaned up after patients no one else wanted to touch, smiled through exhaustion, budgeted on a single income, and made birthdays special with dollar store decorations and home-cooked meals. And yet now, she sat alone, invisible. The next morning, she wrote again. April 18th, no messages. I filled the bird bath today. I stood outside and waited to see if anyone would land. They didn't. The silence keeps growing, not just around me, but in me. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be the woman who says, after all I've done. But how do you not feel that way when all you did is forgotten? By the end of the week, journaling became ritual. Margaret didn't reach for the remote. She didn't check social media. She didn't call. She wrote, each entry a page in her own record, proof she still existed. But even as she wrote, a quiet dread grew inside her. Maybe they hadn't just taken her purse. Maybe they had taken her voice too. Maybe this silence wasn't temporary. Maybe it was by design. The bank smelled of cold air conditioning and lemon-scented polish. Margaret stood in line, her hands tightly clutching the strap of her replacement purse. She hadn't meant to come. Not really. But last night, something had nagged her. Something deeper than the silence. She hadn't checked her savings. The thought had come as she was brushing her teeth, sudden and sharp like a toothache. She hadn't looked in months because there was never any need. She'd always been careful, frugal, cautious to a fault. The money she had left was modest, but solid, enough to last her. So this morning she dressed with purpose, avoiding the mirror. She didn't want to see the worry on her face. "Next window, ma'am," a voice called. She stepped forward. The teller was young, polite, and all smiles. Margaret offered a tight one in return. She slid her ID and account number across the counter. "I'd like to check the activity on my savings, please." The teller typed swiftly, glancing at the screen. Her smile faltered just slightly. Then it returned, polished and professional. "One moment, please," she said, standing up. Margaret's stomach sank. 2 minutes passed, then 3. The teller returned with a manager, a man in his mid-40s with a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. He introduced himself with a calm voice. "Mrs. Campbell, could we speak in one of the offices?" She followed him wordlessly to a glass-walled room at the far end of the lobby. He gestured for her to sit. She did, her heart starting to hammer. "I understand you're concerned about activity on your savings account," he began. "I haven't looked in a while," Margaret admitted, "but I wanted to make sure everything was still whole." He clicked into his tablet and turned it slightly toward her. Margaret squinted. The balance blinked back at her. $31.72. She blinked once, then again. That's not right," she whispered. "That account had over $40,000. The manager nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, it did." He tapped the screen and showed her a list of transactions. There were 3 large withdrawals made over the last 3 weeks, each marked as internal transfers to an account under Campbell DeWitt Holdings. "Campbell DeWitt?" she echoed. He pointed. "It's listed here as a joint business account. The signatory on the transfers was authorized through a notarized power of attorney." Margaret's mouth went dry. "I didn't sign anything like that," she said firmly. He pulled up a scanned image. "I can show you the documents we have on file." The image appeared. A crisp form, notarized, properly dated, her name in bold at the top, and at the bottom, in neat cursive, her signature. Margaret's eyes widened. It looked exactly like hers. The swoop of the M, the looped G, even the slight tilt at the end. But she had never signed this, never seen this. Her voice cracked. "That's not me." The manager raised his eyebrows, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Campbell, I understand this is upsetting, but the document was verified. It includes a government-issued ID, a photocopy of your driver's license." "I didn't give anyone that." "There's also a video recording," he added, "part of our updated verification process for high-value transactions. Would you like to view it?" Margaret nodded slowly, her body heavy with dread. He pulled it up on screen. The footage showed a woman sitting at a desk in a private room, face partially obscured by a scarf and large glasses, voice muted, but she could see the hand, see the motion, see the signature being made. The woman looked just like her. Margaret leaned forward, breath shallow. "No," she murmured. "No, that's not me. I wasn't there." Her mind reeled. Was it deepfake? A look-alike? Or worse, had she somehow done this and forgotten? No, that couldn't be. But the doubt crept in like water through a cracked ceiling. She clutched her armrest. "I've been healthy, mentally. No signs of dementia. I would know. But what if she wouldn't? What if this was the first sign?" The manager, trying to be gentle, asked, "Would you like to initiate a fraud claim? We can begin an internal investigation." "Yes," she snapped, sharper than she intended. "Yes, please." She signed the request with trembling hands. As she did, she glanced down at her own writing, compared it to the signature on the screen. Identical. That night, back home, she sat in the dark with the journal open across her lap. The pages were smudged with earlier entries, but today's would be different. April 19th. The money is gone. All of it. The documents were forged. Or maybe they weren't. I can't tell anymore. The signature matches mine perfectly. Even the slope of the pen. There's a video. A woman pretending to be me. Or is it me? I can't trust my memory. I can't trust my eyes. I feel like I've slipped into a version of life where I'm still present, but my presence doesn't matter. It's like being erased in stages. She paused. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, her house felt too still. She thought of calling Lily, but the fear held her back. What if Lily knew? What if Elena orchestrated this? Or Vanessa? Or all of them? What if they'd already decided she was better left behind, forgotten? The tears came slow. Not from sadness, but from exhaustion. She wiped them away, closed the journal, and whispered into the silence, "I know who I am." But even as she said it, a small shaking part of her wasn't so sure. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, painting gentle slats of gold across Margaret's desk. She hadn't opened the drawers in a while, maybe months. Her hands moved almost absent-mindedly, sorting through old receipts, birthday cards, and pens that no longer worked. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe just proof that she'd existed in some way beyond what had been taken. A paperclip snagged on the corner of a faded folder. She pulled it out. It was pink, slightly wrinkled, covered in glitter that still clung to the edges, years after it had been glued with a child's heavy hand. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. On the cover, in shaky crayon letters, "For Grandma," by Lily, age 6. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, stick figures holding hands, crayon hearts, smiling suns. In one picture, a large figure, gray hair, a blue dress, stood with arms stretched wide, shielding a smaller child from what looked like a thunderstorm. At the top, in bold capital letters, "Grandma is my hero." Margaret didn't mean to cry, but the tears came hard and fast, slipping down her cheeks and soaking the page. The drawing blurred, but the message remained. It wasn't just the sweetness of it, it was the reminder, sharp and unrelenting, that she had once meant something, that to Lily she had been safety, warmth, strength, someone to run toward, not away from. She held the picture to her chest and sobbed until the grief turned to silence. Later that afternoon, still heavy with emotion, she stepped outside for a walk. The air was cool and crisp, and the familiar rhythm of her neighborhood offered small comfort. Her legs carried her down the block without much direction until she found herself near the corner house where Mrs. Donnelly lived. The older woman sat on her porch, surrounded by ceramic gnomes and mismatched flower pots. "Margaret?" she called gently. "Is that you?" Margaret nodded, offering a faint smile. "Come have some tea. I just brewed a fresh pot, and you look like you could use a sit." Margaret hesitated. She hadn't spoken to anyone face to face in days, maybe longer, but the kindness in Mrs. Donnelly's voice cut through the fog. She walked up the steps and settled into the chair opposite her. The tea was chamomile, warm and floral. They talked about nothing at first, the weather, the squirrels tearing into the garden, a pothole that still hadn't been fixed. But gradually, Margaret let her guard down. "I think my family has moved on without me," she said, her voice breaking. "They took things, important things, and no one seems to care." Mrs. Donnelly didn't ask questions. She didn't rush in with advice. She simply poured more tea. "You know," she said softly, "after my husband died, I thought I was done mattering. The phone stopped ringing. The invitations dried up. I felt like a ghost in my own life." Margaret looked at her, surprised. "But then," Mrs. Donnelly continued, "I started showing up for myself, not for anyone else, just me. I planted herbs. I joined the book club. I made my porch too bright for anyone to ignore." Margaret smiled weakly. I know it doesn't fix what's broken, Mrs. Donnelly said, but it reminds you that you are still whole. That night, Margaret sat at her desk again. She opened the pink folder, pulled out Lily's drawing, and pinned it on the wall above her monitor. Then she wrote, April 21st. Today I remembered that I was someone's hero. Not for money, not for status, but for love. I've spent so much time asking why they did this to me. Maybe I'll never understand. But what I do know is this. I was once enough, just as I was. And I can be that again. I am still here. And I still matter. She closed the journal and reached for her knitting needles, untouched for years. She didn't remember how to start, but she'd learn again. For the first time in weeks, Margaret didn't feel erased. She felt beginning. Margaret had been across the street only a few minutes when she turned and realized Mrs. Donnelly's porch looked too bright, too inviting. Something about that warmth pulled her back. She knocked gently. The door opened before she could think twice. Come in. I found something I thought you might like, Mrs. Donnelly said, stepping aside. She led Margaret into a cozy living room, its walls lined with bookshelves so full they sagged at the middle. Bookshop, originally, Mrs. Donnelly said, settling into an overstuffed armchair as she poured tea again. I sold it after Harold died, retirement, but I kept the stock. Margaret looked closely at the titles. Guides on gardening, memoirs, estate planning, even a few novels she half remembered reading. Then one caught her eye. How to Protect Your Legacy Legally. The spine was faded but familiar. My daughter wrote this recommendation in my card, she murmured, picking it up and thumbing through the pages. I never thought to read it. Yeah, Mrs. Donnelly smiled. Sometimes the right book finds you when you're ready. Margaret flipped through the opening chapters, reading guidelines on wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and protective legal instruments designed to safeguard assets, especially for people vulnerable to exploitation. A section title jumped out. The Inadvertent Gift, How Signed Documents You Don't Fully Understand Can Erase Your Legacy. Margaret sat straighter. Mrs. Donnelly watched her, quiet but attentive. You know, she began softly, I used to teach speech therapy with old veterans after the war. I saw a lot of situations like yours. Margaret set the book down, surprised. There was this woman, my friend from grade school, Lucy. She lived down the block. They dropped off her house just like that. Forged documents, notarized papers, people she trusted behind her back. Margaret's fingers tightened around the cup. Her daughter, her son-in-law. They moved in after she was out and out of the story. Margaret's throat tightened. She had to force herself to nod. I never asked her all the details, but when she passed, I took the store, and I swore that if someone ever gets suspicious, I'd tell them. Margaret swallowed, voice cracking. I think that's happening to me. Mrs. Donnelly's eyes were steady. You're not wrong to feel that, and you're not alone. Margaret rose and moved to the shelf. She pulled How to Protect Your Legacy Legally back down and flipped to a page with a sample Power of Attorney form. She read the legalese that made dreams of help sound like silken traps. Look at this, Mrs. Donnelly said, pointing. This wording, it's eerily similar to what they invited you to sign tonight. This birthday celebration is to honor you. Please sign here to acknowledge our arrangement. It's a tactic, respectful, comfortable, almost affectionate. Margaret closed her eyes. She could hear Elena's voice. Just sign these papers, Mom, for the estate. It's just housekeeping. She had brushed it off, trusted it. Now she reread the words, the clauses she hadn't paid attention to. When she reopened her eyes, tears glistened, not from sadness, but clarity. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered. I had a drawing from Lily and a friend offering tea, and a book I never read. It was all bait. Mrs. Donnelly nodded. Exactly. They staged it. For you to feel at home. Margaret pressed her hand to her chest. But if you knew her... Mrs. Donnelly's face shadowed briefly. Yes, I was her classmate. She moved away, but I knew enough to realize you were the next target. I followed what they've done over the years. That's why I kept that book. Why I offered tea. Why I didn't say something sooner." Margaret stared at her. Honor, sorrow, relief, all collided. "That makes me feel less alone," she said quietly. Mrs. Donnelly reached out, placing a comforting hand over Margaret's. "You're not alone, and you still have a future worth protecting." Margaret left the house clutching the book and her journal, her steps steady for the first time in days. When she reached home, she placed Lily's drawing and the legal guide on the mantel side by side, a symbol of what she had preserved and what she needed to safeguard. That evening, she opened her journal. April 22nd. Today I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was set up. Not by memory, but by design. A celebration disguised as consent. Love twisted, but I won something back. Clarity, dignity, and the knowledge that I knew eventually. I wasn't alone, and that is everything. Margaret woke before dawn, the morning light soft on her face. For the first time, a gentle sense of anticipation stirred within her. She dressed deliberately, packed a small bag, and closed the door behind her. Today, she would leave the house she had turned into a gilded cage. She sold the home quietly, using documents that had survived, legitimate this time, with help from Mrs. Donnelly's careful guidance. The move was long overdue. The echoes of betrayal no longer fit within those walls. The new town was modest but warm. She rented a small room above a local bookstore, the very same owned by her neighbor turned confidant. Every morning she walked downstairs, greeted by the scent of old paper and dust and Mrs. Donnelly's favorite jazz record playing softly in the background. It was the perfect place to heal. Part of her healing came through action. One afternoon, she began welcoming a small group of older women into the back corner of the bookstore. Armed with decades of experience, managing household budgets, navigating modern apps, trimming rose bushes without straining joints, Margaret introduced simple but essential life skills, organizing pill schedules, email basics, safe ways to manage online banking. The group grew from 2 to 10 to 15, each woman arriving with a story and a question. Margaret responded with patience. She remembered the principles of adult learning, how elders learn better when the topic is practical, relevant, grounded in real life, and delivered with respect. "There," she said one afternoon, pointing at a diagram she'd drawn on a whiteboard. "This is how you protect your online account by using two-step authentication. Not because it's cool, but because it keeps you safe." They laughed, nodded politely, lingered after the lesson to chat about the grandchildren. Margaret didn't feel needed. She felt significant. That evening, back in her small room, she opened the laptop and typed a few lines into a new blog. Anonymous, raw, and honest. She wrote about the calm she found in the bookstore corner, about the stolen life, and the strange sense of relief in being able to say her truth to someone. Anyone, even if she didn't know who would read it. Blogging, she had learned, wasn't just writing. It was therapy, connection, reclamation, a digital form of narrative therapy that helped people process trauma and find resilience. Her first post went live that night. She didn't expect anyone to read, but over the weeks, shy comments began appearing. "I thought I was alone in my betrayal. Your words make me brave enough to leave my own toxic home." Small replies, but they felt like handholds on a steep climb. Margaret wrote twice a week, alternating between what she called bookstore wisdom and midnight confessionals. The blog became both a diary and a lifeline. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, she stopped to read her posts in the bookstore while overseeing a knitting session she ran for the group. She shared tips for budgeting, recipes for comfort food that weren't just soup, but comfort. She directed women in the group to resources for older adults learning technology. Lifelong learning, she realized, wasn't just a theory, it was a lifeline. One trainee, Agnes, looked at Margaret with tear-bright eyes. "I feel alive again," she said, and Margaret felt her own heart bloom. She realized she was no longer the burden. She was the anchor. That night, with the window open to the quiet street, Margaret wrote, April 24th. I am no longer waiting to be chosen or defined by those who saw me only as a piece to move. Here, in this dusty corner of a bookshop turned classroom, I am not a shadow. I am a teacher, a story, a witness. My words, even anonymous, reach souls. My skills, those simple truths learned by heart, can guide others to stand tall again. I am not a burden. I am weight. I am gravity. I am presence. Her pen paused, and she closed the journal. The blog had comments again. Your words today made my day. Thank you for your bravery. I feel seen. She smiled. She'd never felt more seen in her life. Evening light filtered softly through the bookstore's front window, landing on the desk where Margaret typed her latest blog post. A comment box glowed softly below. Your words saved me today. She paused, fingers hovering over the keys. Before she could respond, the door chimed. 3 people entered, sharp-suited, purposeful. The taller one spoke first. Miss Campbell, I'm Joseph Financial, elder law attorney at Wright & Meyer. We've been following your blog. Margaret's heart skipped. Your blog? She asked, voice trembling. The second man, a bit older, stepped forward. Yes, your story caught our attention. We're investigating a financial exploitation ring targeting elderly individuals. We believe your case may be part of it. Her chest tightened. Part of it? They pulled up a chair. Margaret, a woman who'd feared being erased, listened as they explained. Forged documents, unauthorized transfers, fabricated powers of attorney, all signs of elder financial abuse. Personal, legal, emotional, targeted to drain savings under the guise of care and trust. They spoke of the legality, misuse of power of attorney, coercion, undue influence, common in family-perpetrated cases. They needed her story to strengthen their broader investigation. Margaret's head swirled. She blinked back tears. Elena, she's my daughter. Her voice cracked. Understandably, this is difficult, the third man said gently. But the law may allow assets to be reclaimed and the perpetrators held accountable. Legal protections exist to protect and recover elder abuse victims. Margaret closed her eyes, blinking back emotion. She didn't want to report her daughter. Yet as the words hung in the air, another message appeared on her phone, from Lily. She opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Grandma, I'm so sorry. I was scared. Mom made me read the message that pushed you to sign. I didn't know what she was doing. It felt like love at first, but I realized later it wasn't. I never wanted to hurt you. I'm so sorry for being her tool. I love you with all my heart. Lily. Margaret's throat closed up. She stared at the screen, breath caught in her chest. She looked up at the attorneys. Their faces were kind, expectant, but she couldn't look at them. Memories swirled. Lisa's card she found, Lily's drawings, the staged party, the stolen deed. Her granddaughter's plea echoed louder. I love you. Tears fell. The taller attorney cleared his throat softly. Ms. Campbell, there are ways to proceed while protecting your wishes and privacy. But Margaret wasn't listening. She focused instead on the words Lily had written. Not a plea, but an admission, a cry for forgiveness. How did I get here? Margaret whispered. My own daughter, taking from me. The second attorney offered a tissue. Margaret accepted, voice trembling. I don't want to destroy my family, she said, but I can't let this define me either. Silence followed. Lily's message arrived again, attached with a scanned image of a hand-drawn letter in shaky handwriting. I'm sorry I didn't understand then. I hope you can forgive me one day. That betrayal, terrible, raw, cut deeper than any legal wound. Yet in that fragile apology, Margaret heard a lifeline. Steeling herself, she looked at the attorneys. "What if I don't want to press charges?" she said. "But can't this stop for everyone else? I want to protect others, just not her." The attorneys exchanged glances. "You have the power here," one replied softly. "You could opt for restorative measures, financial recovery for yourself, while allowing your daughter to face consequences privately or through mediation." Margaret nodded slowly. She stared at Lily's letter again. She could feel grief and love colliding inside her. Finally, she spoke again. "I need time, but I want to help others avoid what happened to me." One attorney smiled gently. "We can work on both. You can tell your story, help other victims in the blog. It can be advocacy." Margaret swallowed hard. The thought both scared and soothed her. The attorneys stood and gathered their things. "We'll follow your lead. You're not alone in this," they said. They left. Margaret watched them go, then stared at Lily's letter. Love and betrayal. Forgiveness and justice. She typed one more line into the blog's draft. "I won't say what I feel today. I won't tell you how broken I am. But I will say this. I am not the same as the pain done to me. And I know now I'm not alone." Margaret closed the laptop, and for the first time she slept. Not as the woman they tried to erase, but as the one writing her own ending. The new house, a modest cottage nestled between old maples, felt different from the moment Margaret stepped inside. Humble, but honest. No stained glass chandeliers, no unfamiliar voices in the hallway, just her. She began replanting her life quietly. The first gesture came naturally. She opened her journal and wrote, "April 25th, I am home, not to what I lost, but to who I still am." Each entry carried less pain and more intention. Her phone buzzed one afternoon downstairs in the bookstore. An unfamiliar number. Attorneys again. Margaret answered, careful. A voice introduced themselves from a non-profit elder advocacy organization investigating financial exploitation. They'd seen her blog and offered her a role as an honorary advisor for their elder protection initiative. It was unexpected. She paused, heart thumping. She imagined Elena's name scoring across the invitation, but also she imagined purpose. She accepted. Each week, she attended conferences in person or online, sharing her story anonymously and forging strategies to protect vulnerable seniors. She declined media interviews. Her face stayed private. Her story stayed honest. At the same time, she kept gardening. Early morning sunlight painted gold on her hands as she pruned roses on her small porch. Healing, she found, was rooted in quiet acts that whispered resilience. Even petals could find their way to bloom again after being cut. One evening, with soil still under her nails, she received a letter from Lily. The handwriting was small but determined. "Dear Grandma, I have thought a lot about what I wrote. I meant every word. I used to believe adults were unbeatable, untouchable. But now I know grown-ups can make mistakes, big ones, and even bigger ones when they listen to fear more than love. You showed me love is stronger. You showed me kindness means more when someone has lost everything and still holds on. I want to help others the way you are helping me. Love always, Lily." Margaret folded the note slowly, tracing each letter with her finger. Tears welled, not from sadness, but gratitude. She typed a short blog post later that night. She chose kindness. That is grace. The post felt like a small beacon. Margaret's role with the Elder Advocacy Group deepened. She met with a team of attorneys, social workers, and law enforcement specialists working on elder justice. They lobbied for laws like the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act and strove to fill gaps in protections through local adult protective services programs. Her story anchored their policy proposals and outreach efforts. It became the real story behind the legal language. She never saw Elena again. She didn't want to. Therapy taught her that closure doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes it simply demands courage to let go. One gentle afternoon, sunlight through the window lit her journal as she wrote, April 30th. Victory isn't loud. It isn't seen on TV or celebrated in headlines. It's quiet. The decision to live truthfully when everything around you was false. It's planting roses in the ashes and watering them with your conviction. I am not forgotten. I am not broken. I am still here. In her community, people began to notice a change. The bookstore offered a place for seniors to gather, to share. The librarian named a chair Grandma's Corner, where anyone could leave a borrowed book with a note. Others started small blogs, telling stories of resilience too. Margaret remained in the background, but her presence was felt. On a mellow spring morning, she visited the bank. With her lawyer, she completed steps to recover what remained of her accounts through official channels. Adult Protective Services empowered the process. She didn't take every dollar. She took just enough to rebuild safely and made donations to elder support nonprofits. They mailed her a small plaque. In quiet strength, truth finds its voice. She put it on her shelf next to Lily's drawing in her journal. Every story has a different ending. For Margaret, it was not revenge. It was restoration, a life anchored in choice, not obligation. She wrote one final journal entry. May 5th. The silence has its own victory. My body is free of fear. My heart is free to rebuild. I am not the parts they tried to erase. I am the story I reclaimed, with roots planted deep and petals reaching for light. And in the quiet of her home, the roses bloomed again, steady, alive, triumphant. The sea had always been Margaret's quiet confidant. Tonight she sat on the edge of her little porch, the air soft and salt-kissed. Waves whispered against the shore below, like lullabies coaxing her to remember how to feel peace. Weeks had passed since she began advising the Elder Advocacy Network. Elena's name hung in the air around her, but Margaret had not broken her silence, not to the lawyers. Not to Lily, not even in the pages of her journal. She preferred the wordless company of the shoreline. Earlier that day, she'd received a package from her lawyer's office. The return address was unfamiliar, bland, formal. She'd almost left it unopened, unused to paperwork arriving on her door, especially after all she had endured. Now in the ocean light, she opened it with deliberate calm. Inside, she found a single sheet of stationery, its paper heavy and slightly textured. Mother, I do not know when or if you will read this, but I want you to know you were right. I see now why you didn't sign, and because of that, you have survived. I've attached papers that undo what was done. The power of attorney is revoked. The property ownership is returned to you, legally and irrevocably. I cannot ask for forgiveness. I didn't earn it. But if hope still has a place, I hope the peace you found, or are finding, includes grace toward me. Elena. Margaret stared at the note. Her heart convulsed with 1,000 emotions. Relief, disbelief, fury, sorrow, love. Beneath all of them, a fragile bloom of understanding. She lifted the enclosed documents. Yes, they were real. Legally binding, carefully executed to reverse the damage. She traced the fine print with her finger, feeling the paper's weight, the authority in every word. For years she had felt helpless, betrayed, erased. Now the law, once used as a tool against her, had become a hand extended in truce. But she did not lean forward to take it. She did not reply. Not yet. Instead, she folded the letter and laid it beside Lily's framed drawing. 2 letters. One from granddaughter's pen, full of love and apology. Another from daughter's hand, heavy with remorse. Margaret closed her eyes. The breeze carried distant gull calls, the ocean's pulse steady beneath. She whispered to the waves, I have peace now. She remained silent. Days slipped into weeks. The beach became her sanctuary. She walked the sand at dawn, letting the wet grains press between her toes, steadying her. She tended to her small rose garden, each red bloom not a declaration, but a quiet testament to the life she still lived. Legally, the house was hers again, but emotionally, nothing was rushed. She had the right to the space, yes, but more importantly, she had earned the right to her feelings, anger, release, whatever shape they formed. One evening, the ocean glowed under the fading sun as soft tendrils of pink and gold wrapped the sky. Margaret sat on the porch, journal open on her lap. She wrote, May 10th, the reversals are official. Legally, everything is mine again. But the real victory isn't a document. It's this, the return of my right not to speak. Not yet. Elena chose to redeem herself, not by pleading, not by pursuing peace, but by returning what she had taken. It's not reconciliation yet. Maybe it never will be. But this was a kind offering. I accept it on my own terms, and with that, I have what no one could ever seize from me again, peace. Below her journal, the final stanza of that entry, she wrote 3 words, I am home. Margaret closed the book. Behind her, the waves sighed. The next morning, Lily stood at the porch door. She drew a shaky breath before speaking. Gran, they told me to return, to come. I don't expect things to be the same, but I had to be the one to try. Margaret nodded. No words beyond that were spoken. No embrace. No tears. Just shared presence on a porch in simple daylight, watching the ocean breathe. That evening, she wrote again. May 11th. The weight of silence is not emptiness. It's choosing what to fill space with. When you are finally yours again, Lily is here. Elena is not, and I don't think forgiveness will be a conversation today or tomorrow. But the door is open, now that I am in charge of it. I don't say I'm healed, but I say I'm no longer broken. The final words beneath the swirl of ocean-scented candlelight, she whispered to no one but the page, Here I have won. In the stillness that followed, the sea held its breath for her, and Margaret finally let it.